Now here's your host, Tom Dirato.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Eddie Sutton Show. Since our last visit, despite some anxious moments, I'm sure, the Cowboys have now won 3 in a row, 10 of their last 12, 7-2 in Big 12 conference play, and that is 1 game off the lead as far as Texas is concerned. But, Eddie, we're still looking for that complete 40-minute game.
You know, we played the Aggies earlier in the week and beat them 66-61. We were down 11 at halftime, and it was a struggle right up to the end, but we did win. And then against Iowa State, we played much better, especially the first 15 minutes of the game. We played as well as we can play, and then we kind of put it in reverse and coasted along there. Ended up winning by 9, but at least we did show some signs offensively that we are playing better.
Let's take a look at the standings now. We're going to see just how tight things are. You're going to see 6 teams within 2 games of the lead.
Well, I think all of those teams that are listed right there have a chance to win the conference because of the balance we have. All those teams are pretty evenly matched, and that's why the next 7 games, anything can happen. When you analyze the schedule, Texas probably has the advantage, but that doesn't mean that they won't lose a player or if they go on the road and somebody beats them that shouldn't beat them. So I think you just got to play them one at a time, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, as usual, we have wall-to-wall highlights for you, and we'll get right to them after this opening timeout.
Hello, honey.
Welcome back to the show. You know, the Aggies from Texas A&M came calling earlier this week, the second of a 3-game homestand, and I'll tell you, they turned out to be pesky once again.
Well, A&M's got good players, and it's just one of those things that they've played a lot of people close, and they just can't get over the hump at times. But one of the disadvantages sometimes in playing in a conference and you go on the road and win first against a lower division ball club, then they come calling to your place, and sometimes your players, regardless of what the coaching staff says, they don't give them proper respect. And I think that's what happened in this ball game. We went out and didn't shoot the ball very well. Now there's Joe Atkins breaking out of his shooting slump, and he led us with 18 points. But then all of a sudden, as the game wore on, they got to thinking, guys, we can play with the Cowboys, and that's what they did. And we had a terrific time trying to contain Cook, their point guard. He ended up leading all scorers with 23, and Jones had 20. But they're going to beat some ball clubs. You just mark it down that A&M, and they've got some of the contenders coming to their place later in the season, and they'll jump up and beat someone because they do have enough talent to do that. And their coaching staff has really blended their ball club together. It's the first year for their coaching staff, and I think if they can add a couple of players to this group, they're going to be really tough next year.
See a couple of back-to-back buckets by Brian Montanati, and he is starting to show that he can play on this level.
Well, I think he's had 4 straight games he scored in double figures, and he had a double-double in this ball game. I think that's the second one of his career, but he is playing so hard and playing well at both ends of the floor that a lot of our fans are asking why isn't he in the starting lineup. And I tell everyone that as long as he probably wouldn't get any more minutes if he started rather than come off the bench. As long as he's satisfied with that, he's a great spark coming off the bench and going in the ball game. So I think all of us are extremely proud of the way Brian's playing.
He truly doesn't care whether he comes off the bench or starts, and that's a nice attitude. All he wants to do is win and contribute.
There's a great example of what we call go in and out with a basketball. Get it into the low post, they double up, a kick out, and now the perimeter players faced up the basket, and it's a higher percentage shot.
That is one thing that you wanted to see more of, and we didn't see for about a half a dozen game stretch, but hopefully that'll be a trend from here on out.
It seemed like to me we did a better job of getting the ball inside in these 2 ball games with A&M and Iowa State. We ran a special scoring play there and missed a shot, but there's a good example of hustle on the part of Brian.
Brian had 11 rebounds in this game.
What a follow shot there by Desmond. We've got to get him doing more of that. Look from where he came from, and with his athletic ability, he just goes up and grabs the ball one hand and spikes it through. We've been on Desmond a little bit about his lack of going to the offensive board hard enough, and I think that's one of the things that he'll do a better job in the next few ball games.
He was frustrated in that game, obviously, but he did break out in the next one against Iowa State. But here's good defense by Gottlieb. Gottlieb running through the passing lane.
Doug continues to improve. He's becoming a much better defender. He's such a great passer. don't think he had as many assists in this particular game as we've seen him in some. He had 5. Good head and shoulder fake. Look at Brian. Boy, he's playing with some enthusiasm. And look at Joe. I like that. That's contagious when guys start playing like that with that type of passion.
I like to see a pump fake every once in a while. And we did right there.
Now, a lot of times our big guys, when they go in there, they just put it up and they expose the ball and they get the shot blocked. But you go up there and pump fake it once and freeze the defender, well, then it's much easier to get you an easier shot.
Little bit of action right there in the paint. And Alex had to step aside with fouls. Last couple of games, he's been somewhat neutralized because of foul problems.
Well, he's got to quit fouling. You know, if you're aggressive, you're going to make some fouls. We're doing some pressing there. Nice play by Desmond, and Joe gets the basket. But you've got to back off sometimes and let a guy shoot over the top of you rather than try to block a shot. And that's what Alex is doing right now. He's committing too many what we call nickel and dime fouls or careless fouls. There's a shot by Pete. Pete didn't have a great shooting night. He was 4 out of 14, had 12 points. But that was the basket that put us ahead with less than a minute to go.
When he puts the ball on the floor and tries to create something, he takes away some of that stationary defense that they've been throwing at him for the last 2 weeks.
He's a much better player, Tom, when he is active. When you look at the number of rebounds that he pulls down, then if he's got a sizable number, then you know he's played well. Sometimes he has a tendency just to want to hang around and shoot the perimeter shot.
How about this right here, huh?
They had won a game against Baylor, similar to this, where they threw the ball the length of the floor and made a tap off to one of their shooters, and the guy hit the shot that beat the Bears. A play very similar to what we ran when Country hit that three-pointer that tied the game with Missouri a few years ago. But on this particular throw-in, it hit the scoreboard.
And you had Fred fronting him, which was not done in that Baylor game. Now, we're at Iowa State. Your timing is everything in this world. What is it now? Every time we play a team, they're on a hot streak. Iowa State came in having won 4 out of 5.
Playing very well, and just before they played us, they beat maybe the hottest team in the league, the University of Nebraska, and they have done a great job in the first year with their ball club, and they've got an outstanding player in Pfizer. Now, we just couldn't stop him. I think that's the most points we've given up to any individual this year. He got 32. But what we were able to do here, we were more patient. We moved much better offensively. We executed our screens better. We spread them out a little bit and got some back doors. You saw one by Gottlieb a little earlier, and there's one by Desmond. And defensively, with the exception of not doing a good job on Pfizer early, we just played about as well as we're capable of playing. We forced them out of their man defense, which Larry Eustace, their coach, likes to play. Came to a zone, and there's Glenn and Alexander breaking out of his shooting slump. And when he hit that shot, he had the biggest smile on his face. He was almost like, gosh, I finally hit one. And he went on, of course, to score double figures in this ball game.
You pick and choose, and at times it's been real good, and it being the press. You've been able to turn tempos up in your favor. You've been able to rattle other teams.
Well, we started to press here, and I don't think we forced him into that many turnovers, but we did force him to play a quicker tempo than they wanted to play. And I think sometimes when you press, it gets you offensively moving better. Seems to with this ball club anyway. For
the first time in a long time, we jumped out to a semi-comfortable lead and made a team come to us.
Well, we were up 43-31 at halftime, and we actually had a 15 or 16-point lead earlier than that. When you're ahead, the basket seems to enlarge, and when you get behind, it shrivels up a little. We ran a spatial scoring play for Peterson to begin the second half, and he hit the tray. We wanted to get him off of getting him started the second half because he only had 2 points at halftime.
And he really came on in the second half. It was kind of a tale of two halves, really. Although everybody contributed, Brian and Desmond in the first half, and Pete and Glendon in the second half.
Well, we had 4 guys in double figures, Mason with 14, Pete led us with 18, Alexander had 13, and Brian had 14.
Well, you see in the final seconds coming down here, this was a good win over a good basketball team that, as we said, was hot at the time.
Well, they elevated our record to 16-5, as you mentioned earlier, 7-2, and we do have some momentum going into what is really the toughest stretch of our schedule. We've got Oklahoma on Saturday, then we go to Colorado, then we have the Longhorns coming back home, then we go to Nebraska, then we got Missouri back here, then we go to Kansas, then we got Texas Tech to close out the season. So every game is a winnable game, but every one of those teams can beat us as well.
Well, it hasn't been a season for the faint of heart, that's for sure. If you've ever dreamed of being a basketball coach on the Division I level, I think you better watch this week's Off the Court feature. It's all coming up next. If you think we've taken more than our share of white-knuckle rides already this season, you're right. Consider these numbers for a second. 10 of our first 21 games thus far have been won by or lost by an average of just 3.8 points. 4 of our 5 losses have been by an average of 3.5 points, and 6 of the 16 wins by an average of 4.1 points. Obviously, that's tough on everyone's nerves, and you know coaching is a wonderful profession. It has many, many rewards, but it can be stressful, to say the least, especially when every game seems to come down to the final minute. It's a job that has its own unique brand of pressure.
You see me keep rubbing my head. Sometimes I had a headache, and sometimes I'm trying to rub away all those wrinkles I've developed this year. We've had some close games. You know, I've talked to some of our fans, and they feel the same way. They said, Coach, we got to have a blowout once in a while because when we leave Gallagher Iba, we're just worn out. And I think that's the type of season it has been.
You know, the good news is Wade Pearson, who did a great job on that feature, had a lot of shots to pick from. The bad news is that he had a lot of shots to pick from for that feature because you've had your moments this year. There's still a lot to come. The Notebook, our Ask the Coach feature, and Bedlam Part 2. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's get right to the Notebook. And I'm glad we got a little time on this show because this is going to be a hard one to explain. What's an RPI, in your opinion?
Well, that's what the NCAA Tournament Committee uses to, one of the things to decide who the at-large teams are. I mean, it's, as I understand it, it's the strength of your schedule, strength of the schedule of people you've played and how they've come out, and number of wins and losses. But it's kind of complicated, so if you want to...
Nobody really knows is what you're trying to say, right?
Well, there are a lot of coaches who don't quite understand.
See, that's what I'm trying to bring out. I mean, you guys could coach and they'll say, well, I think it's wins and losses and percentage, but nobody can sit down there and tell you, can they?
Well, why don't you explain?
Okay, I'm gonna try to. Okay. It's based on wins and losses. Okay, yours, your opponents, and then the winning percentage of your opponents against their opponents. And that's all running through a computer, I guess, and it comes out with a number.
What always amazes me how you can jump from one game to another. I mean, you know, you wouldn't think that one game would make that much difference, but you can be ranked 46 one game, and the next week you look and you're 55th or 33rd, and so that I think kind of baffles some of us.
Well, let's go to the next one. I know we can describe this one. Poll Talk. It has to do with the 2 polls each week, one ESPN USA Coaches Poll, AP Media Poll. You don't subscribe to either poll. The only poll you care about is at the end of the year, but which in your mind would have a little bit more credence than the other?
First of all, polls are great, and I think they're really special for the fans. And what always amazes me a little bit is that they usually are pretty close. Sometimes you'll see it's not quite the same, but when you take the top 10 teams, the AP, the sports writers, the sportscasters versus the UPI or the ESPN poll, the top ball clubs usually are pretty close together. But when you get down maybe from 18 to 25, it could vary. You asked me which was the best. Yeah, I'm not sure. I voted on the coaches poll for years. I don't vote on it now. But I think that both the sports writers, sportscasters, coaches, they try to pick maybe the top 15, 18 ball clubs, and then maybe they'll go in their own area and try to pick some teams out of their league, which is okay.
You alluded to our next item, hard road, but the Cowboys play 3 of the next 4 on the road, 4 of the next 6. That's a tough test.
Well, it's tough anytime you go on the road, but in a league like we have this year, where there's just not that much difference between the ball clubs, it becomes even more difficult. I think that's one reason why you've seen more teams go on the road and win this season than maybe in past.
Well, it's time for this week's Internet question from oakstate.com. It's presented by Southwestern Bell, and our question this week has to do with players looking to transfer. And Ronald up there in Oswego, Illinois, wants to know.
Well, Ronald, I tell you, there are a lot of young men and young women that once they get to one school, they decide they want to go elsewhere for a lot of reasons. And the way that is done, if they do decide to make a transfer and it becomes generally known to the public, before another school can contact that person, they have to call the institution where the student athlete now resides and get permission. Let's use Mike Johnson, let's use Scott Robish, 2 young men that left us at semester. Once it became known, you cannot believe how many phone calls we got, and we were, you know, we welcomed them, and we told them we would give them a release, because if they don't have a release, they can't go anywhere else and have financial aid. So sometimes schools can play hardball and say, we're not going to release him. But most of the time, I think institutions, once they talk with the parents and they talk to the student athlete, they'll agree, we'll release you. Mike Johnson, by the way, is enrolled at William & Mary, and Scott Robish is at Butler, and certainly we wish him the very best.
Well, if you have a question for Eddie Sutton that you want answered on the show, log on to Oklahoma State's official athletic website at oakstate.com. Participate in the Southwestern Bell Ask Coach Sutton contest. Before we get it to Oklahoma and take a look at Oklahoma, had a couple of visitors this week of interest.
We did have the national coach of the Swedish team and his assistant were both here for 3 days. And what 2 great people, and really no basketball. They came up and looked at some film, and they really were here for one reason, to take a look at Frederick. They were making a tour across the United States. They have 13 players from Sweden in different colleges across the country, and they just wanted to be there and give them a little pep talk. And I think it really helped Frederick, because, you know, right now Frederick has lost a little confidence. And I think the fact that those 2 guys came from his country to watch him play and to watch him practice was very beneficial.
I don't think there's any doubt that our offense bottomed out in Game 1 against Oklahoma. 28%. It'd be tough to beat anybody at 28%.
You know, that game, both teams played terrific defense. You know, they bragged on OU's defense, and they certainly did do a good job on us, but we did a good job on them. If we can play as well defensively against the Sooners on Saturday and then improve our offense a little bit, we can get even. But it's always a bedlam series. It's always a tough game for both teams. And I think our ball club will go down there and play real well.
Well, again, tip-off time at Lloyd Noble Center, 8:30 Saturday night. That's all the time we have for this week's show. For Eddie Sutton, our entire crew here at Educational Television Services, Tom Dirato. Goodbye, everybody.